All right, thanks for joining us. Today we're going to introduce you all to the Energy Venture Series, which is a series of events by Spark Clean Energy that shares with students across the country the fundamentals of the clean energy industry and entrepreneurial skills. It is designed to help prepare students for upcoming business plan competitions, clean energy business plan competitions, with the support of the Department of Energy and our other partners, MIT, VentureWell, and Three Squares Inc. Thanks again for joining the call today. So let's talk a little bit more about what the program looks like and what it will include in each community. But first, let's talk about our logistics. We will be meeting today for about 75 minutes total, but that's going to be split up. We've had a delay with our speaker. He'll be joining us later this evening. So we'll speak for a few minutes now, and then we'll give you a chance to ask your questions and prepare for David Livingston, our speaker, to join us later on in the call. Please do use the questions button, the Q&A button, to submit questions that we can share with David Livingston or we can answer for you right here. These slides will also be emailed out to anybody who requests the slides or the video. So the video of the conversation we have now and with David Livingston a little bit later this evening will be shared with everybody. And please do feel free to use the Spark Clean NRG Twitter handle to tweet with us. This evening you'll hear from me, the Director of Outreach, Matt Caffrey. My contact information is here, and our Great Plains Regional Outreach Intern, and he will be kind of having the conversation with David Livingston a little bit later this evening. So I wanted to first introduce you all to Spark and our mission and the work that we're working to do across the country. So let's dive straight in. So first, Spark's purpose is to empower the next generation of energy innovators. And the way we see this is the future of energy is increasingly upon us. You know, there are breakthroughs every day. Renewables are increasingly cost competitive, and there are great opportunities in the field of clean energy. And yet the workforce is not quite prepared yet. The students across the country are not quite there aren't as many opportunities available to students as there should be to prepare students for these coming opportunities and for the shift in our energy system. And yet, again, the challenges are vast. So even while this transformation is taking place, climate change, limited supply, increasing demand, challenges to reliability are making the need for energy innovation greater all of the time. And so we want to help prepare more students to participate in this field and to help them advance on to successful careers in clean energy. And a big part of that is through the program we're going to be rolling out to you all this evening. So our mission at Spark is to help students who are interested in clean energy or in sustainability take that interest and launch into action. We want them to get involved in the clean energy innovation space and pursue that interest both on their campuses and on a national scale. Part of the way we want to do that is to share the best ideas and opportunities from around the country and from each region with students so that they can leverage those opportunities to pursue their careers. So things like sharing existing massive open online courses or existing events in areas and helping more students learn about them and connect to them, creating our own competitions or courses or opportunities. These are all things that are really important to us so that students, again, who are interested in clean energy can pursue a career within the clean energy space. Next, we want to help connect students to the local resources that already exist in their community. And all too often, there are great opportunities and resources that exist in their neighborhoods that they just may not be aware of. And that's a big part of our mission also, is helping students connect to those resources. So I want to tell you a little bit more about the program that we're specifically leveraging to achieve that mission over the course of the fall and the rest of this year. So the Energy Venture Series has 3 goals. again, to activate students who are of varied backgrounds and who come from various disciplines. So these could be students from any part of the country who are energy-focused students, engineers, business students, policy, economics, finance. You know, there are so many varied disciplines that will be critical to the success of the energy industry moving forward. So it's important that we engage students from across all spectrums, not only disciplines, but geographies and socioeconomic backgrounds. So we want to encourage students from all walks of life to participate. We then want to educate those students to give them new skills and new knowledge on energy and entrepreneurship, which is why we're organizing this series online and in multiple cities across the country, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. And then again, we want to connect students to the local clean tech resources that exist in their communities and to national competitions and other resources that exist. So one of the key resources that we want to make sure students are aware of and taking advantage of is MIT's Entrepreneurship 101 course. It's taught by MIT professor Bill Aulett, who is very well renowned within the industry for developing a process to help students become entrepreneurs. And a number of successful companies have launched out of his course. And the idea of Entrepreneurship 101 is that it helps students think about the challenge of launching a venture from the perspective of their customer. You know, what can they bring to customers? Which customers would be sort of the first adopters, the first movers for them? What will be appealing to those customers? And so we really want to help. You know, many people who are excited about clean energy are excited about it because of its cool factor. We want to help students take a step back and remember that somebody, you know, for a company to be successful, somebody has to buy their product or service. And so we really want to help connect students to this course because we think it helps solve one of the key challenges that particularly engineers have when they're pursuing a venture. So we'll also be publishing supplemental curriculum. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like here in a moment. But in addition to this online course, which is available and we want to encourage students to take starting today and moving forward, we're also organizing events this fall in many cities across the country and here online. And this series of events, the Energy Venture Series, as we've discussed, will help students learn entrepreneurial skills and understand deeper segments of the clean tech industry, so that they can be more prepared to launch their own venture, to participate in an upcoming business plan competition, to start a career. We're also building a repository of online resources so that students can access the best of what's available out there already, and we're adding a few new resources with our partners to that pool. So let's talk about a big driving factor for this program, which is the Clean Tech Up competition. So Clean Tech Up is a national clean energy business plan competition that is funded by the Department of Energy. Spark Clean Energy is running the national finals of this competition, but there are 8 collegiate competitions being run by our partners across the country. They are sort of the first step in the Clean Tech Up competition. Students participate in one of the 8 collegiate competitions, and the top 3 teams from each competition proceed to the national final, which we're hosting in June. And so we'll have a total of 24 teams, and I want to tell you a little bit more about all of that here right now. So the Clean Tech Up collegiate competitions, again, are run by our partners, UC Berkeley, Caltech, Rice, Clean Energy Trust, University of Central Florida, Carnegie Mellon University, Rutgers University, and MIT. Each of them has slightly different policies, slightly different deadlines and dates, but they are all part of one national competition, and we'll talk a little bit more about those dates in just a moment. We're also hoping to organize a set of ideation competitions this spring, which will give students that aren't necessarily interested in clean tech innovation, or in clean tech business plan innovation, but are still interested in clean tech innovation itself. They can pursue that kind of innovation through public policy, through nonprofits, or through data science. If students are interested in those types of innovation, we're looking to organize competitions for them this spring, and we encourage you to stay tuned for details. But finally, the national competition we talked about, this Clean Tech Up competition that we talked about for June, will take place during a national clean energy student innovation conference we'll be hosting this June. And so again, the top 24 teams, the finalists from the 8 collegiate competitions will join us for that conference and competition, where the winner will receive $100,000 in seed funding. So we really want to encourage students to participate in Clean Tech Up. So let's talk a little bit more about what that looks like. So the collegiate competitions will be taking place this spring. So far, we know of competitions that will be from February to May, and the deadlines for applying are here on the screen. So depending on your region or which competition you're interested in organizing or in applying for, there are details available for when you would need to apply. Many of these applications the initial application is relatively simple, so you don't have to have a fully formed idea in some cases, and you don't necessarily have to have a fully formed team. In some, again, there's variance, and so I encourage you to reach out to each of the competition organizers, and certainly we can help you find that information if you're looking for it. The competition dates, again, as I said, February to May. Then the ideation competitions, which I mentioned before, for students who are interested in policy, nonprofit, or data science innovation. Those will be this spring. Details have not yet been announced. And then the National Student Clean Energy Innovation Conference and with the National Clean Tech Up competition will be in June. So that's sort of the timeline. For those 24 finalist teams, we also want to let you know about the program our partner VentureWell is running as part of this Clean Tech Up program. So for collegiate competition finalists, there will be a 3-day commercialization trainings for the top teams prior to the national competition to help them really hone their business plan and prepare to go to the national competition and be very successful. We are consulting with, or VentureWell, our partner, is consulting with incubators, entrepreneurs, universities, and others to develop the commercialization training to make sure it is as useful and productive for those teams as possible. And it will even include legal and regulatory advice, refining the pitching materials, finances, and having mentorship relationships bloom. So these are really important pieces for teams that end up in the finalist segment. So I want to take a second before we move on and talk about what this really is looking like in regions across the country. So if you're in one of the 25 communities where we have a fellow on the ground, it's great that you've joined us this evening for the national virtual kickoff, but you can also get involved in your local area. And we've got, again, fellows in cities across the country that can help you do that. We're organizing events across the country all the time. So these events are opportunities for students to come together to meet other folks that are interested in clean energy innovation, to learn more about the clean energy industry, to learn entrepreneurial skills, and they tend to be activity-based, conversation-based. It's not a set of lectures. It's really an opportunity to connect with others and to form teams and to ultimately, hopefully, prepare for either participation in these Clean Tech Up competitions or in the larger clean energy innovation space moving forward. And so I really want to encourage you to do that. One of the resources available to you is a list of all of the fellows across the country, where they're based and what their email is. You can find that on our webpage. There's a link in the resources section of this Google Hangout. It's called the Showcase. So if you click on the Showcase, you can find a link to the fellows in your region and across the country. You can find their emails in their bios, and hopefully you can be in touch with them to find out more about what's going on in their local area. There's also a link to upcoming events in the local area. It's the Spark Clean Energy link. It has the events that are currently on the calendar, but more events are being added to the calendar all the time, so we encourage you to check back and find out about upcoming events. So real quick, I want to talk about what next steps are for different folks. So one thing is we want to encourage you to take Entrepreneurship 101. It's a free course. It is incredibly valuable, particularly for folks who maybe understand the energy and technology side, but really need to better understand the entrepreneurship and business side. So here's an RFID, or here's a square code or a short link. Please feel free to check that out. Make sure to pick the audit option. It is a great way to save money. You get the same course, but at no cost. And then there are also additional resources. The last link in the showcase section is our resources page. It's a repository of free resources, so massive open online courses. So not only Entrepreneurship 101 is linked there, but also Entrepreneurship 102, and a number of clean energy and sustainability focused courses are available there. We have details on the competitions, again, the details that are shared currently. And we also have other clean energy innovation events that you can find out about on that page. And over the next few weeks, we'll be adding videos, blogs, and resources from Spark-hosted events that the fellows are organizing across the country, and from other partners that will hopefully be of use to you. So again, this link is in the showcase section, but you can also click on it, or you can type it in here. It's action.sparkcleanenergy.org/resources. We'll also be hosting conversations with Spark advisors. Details are still coming on this, but we expect our first conversation with Spark advisors. These are folks who are, to be November 18th, these are folks who are mid-career professionals. Many of them work in the clean energy industry from lots of different perspectives: government, nonprofit, startups, larger companies. Some of them have venture capital or finance experience. There's a really great pool of diversity in our advisory committee, and we want to share their wisdom with you. And so details are coming soon, but I do invite you to join us again for that. So at this point, I would love to take any questions. Please use the Q&A section and share any questions that you might have regarding Spark's program. Or if you've got questions for David Livingston, please post them in the Q&A section as well. Again, to get to that, if you're joining us, click on the 9 kind of squares tile, and then select the Q&A tool. Okay, so we are seeing no questions. We're going to go on to our next section. We want to introduce David Livingston. He won't be available to join us until later this evening, so we invite you to come back right here to hear from David Livingston at 7:30 Eastern this evening. But first, we want to give you a brief introduction to him from our Great Plains Regional Outreach Intern, Anand. So Anand, let me allow you to share the floor and give us a little bit of background on David.
Thanks, Matt. Can everyone hear me properly?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Can everyone hear me properly?
I think everybody's got you.
Cool, that sounds great. So I'm Anand. I am the Regional Outreach Intern for the Great Plains region, and I've personally had the opportunity to work with David Livingston myself. David, as it says below, is an Energy and Climate Program Associate at the Carnegie Endowment. And for those of y'all who aren't familiar with the Carnegie Endowment, or maybe aren't quite as plugged into Washington, the Carnegie Endowment is one of the most influential think tanks globally. They do some really groundbreaking research, and all of it links in towards the global scene, or at the very, very least, a national scene where policies can impact, or the research that they've done can impact policy for years and decades to come. So in terms of what David himself has done, He currently serves as an associate at the Carnegie Endowment, as well as an adjunct lecturer at the University of California. He's also a member of the Aspen Institute, the International Association for Energy Economics, and also as a future energy leader for the 2014 and 2017 term of the World Energy Council. His primary focus there on the Energy Council is on alternative transport fuels. In terms of other research that he himself has done, he's also done a lot of work with the US electric vehicle market, emission standards, and the role of venture capital in clean energy technology financing. And that's the primary reason why I asked David to get on the conference call tonight, because in terms of building your startups and really getting your innovations out there into the market, one of the biggest things that you need to do that is seed funding. And venture capital is generally the primary vehicle that people look to whenever they're looking for a seed financing and getting that initial bunch of money that they need in order to build their idea and really get it off the ground. David can shed more light on that particular topic, and he can also provide a bit of an insight into upcoming US policies that will really affect the clean energy economy in years to come. Currently, there are a number of different incentives that the US government offers in order to really get clean energy going and ensure that the United States stays competitive compared to the rest of the world. And David is an expert on those policies, and he can definitely shed some light on what the government's role will be whenever you're building your startup and what role you can expect the government to take in upcoming years. He has an amazing pedigree, and I'm really looking forward to this talk. He's definitely an expert, and I'm sure that it's going to be very enlightening to everyone on this call.
Anand, thank you so much for that introduction for David. Can you walk us through the logistics for folks? So if you've got a question for David, how do we get it answered, and when can folks expect to hear from David? And if they are not able to join us during the call with him, how should they watch the answers to their questions or the conversation we have with him?
Okay, so the call with David will take place at 6:30 p.m. Central Time or 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can definitely submit your questions through the Q&A app that we have here on Google Hangouts on Air. As Matt said before, there's a little section with 9 squares. If you click that, you'll find a Q&A section, and you can definitely submit your questions there. And I'll be speaking with David during the call and also fielding any questions that y'all have for him. So I'll definitely make sure that your questions, that he hears your questions and that they get answered. For those of you who can't make the call when it resumes once David is back with us, we'll definitely be posting this entire video online so that you'll have access to both information about the Energy Ventures curriculum, what Spark is doing there, as well as our talk with David and the insights that he can provide. So yes, definitely go ahead, submit any questions that you have, and we'll make sure that all of them get answered and that y'all see a great talk between us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. While we've been speaking, we do have one question from Brian. So to confirm, there will be events in every city where there's a fellow. So Brian, that's an excellent question. Thanks for submitting it. We do anticipate having events in all of the cities where we currently have a fellow based. Of course, the fellowship is a student-led effort, and it is dependent on the students that are organizing in that community, the fellow that is organizing in that community. And so we haven't confirmed details in every one of the cities, but yes, absolutely, our intention is to have multiple events in each city where a fellow is based. And again, let's just real quick go back to our map of where those fellows are based and sort of what folks can expect. So here's a almost current map of the fellows in the program, where you can expect to have programming announced soon across the country. Any other questions? Again, please do submit additional questions, and we're happy to answer them. Or if you've got questions for David Livingston about the current and future state of the clean energy industry and national and international policy around clean energy, please submit those as well. Great. So for the time being, We're going to pause the call until David is able to join us in about 1 hour. Thanks for joining us thus far, and we'll be back again in about an hour to have our conversation with David. David, Anand, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for the viewers who have hopped back on the call. Anand, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce our conversation, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Matt. So for those of you who perhaps didn't hear my introduction to David earlier, first of all, thanks for joining us. We'll be holding our Q&A session with David Livingston now. David is an expert on innovation, markets, and risk. Some of his specific research relates to venture capital financing in the clean energy sector, global issues related to energy, the US electric vehicle market, and emissions standards. In the past, he's done work for the World Trade Organization and the UN's International Development Organization. Currently, he's a member of the Aspen Institute, the International Association for Energy Economics, and the Royal Institute for International Affairs. He was selected as a future energy leader for the 2014-2017 term of the World Energy Council, and currently he serves in the Council's task force on alternative transport fuels. Thanks so much for joining us, David.
Thanks to all of you.
So
Sorry about the conditions. I know I'm on a train, and I might have to jump out in a second, but if I do, I'll reconnect in the station, and then we'll finish the call in the train station.
Sounds good. So to start off the conversation, where do you see clean energy innovation occurring over the course of the next decade, and where do you think it really needs to be?
Well, clearly we're making significant strides in the power sector. You know, with solar being first and foremost in my mind there. You know, you need only to basically look at the cost curve and look at what's happening in the market to see, you know, what innovation is doing at the moment. But I would highlight a couple things, which is number one, there's an interesting strain of thought about the sufficiency of current innovation trajectories with existing technologies. So if we take solar as an example, there are interesting arguments to be made that we can't get to where we need to be in a subsidy-free environment 10 or 20 years from now at the cost targets that we've set for ourselves in order to roll out solar at scale. That we can't get there with traditional silicon technology, perovskites or other, you know, future technologies. Now, there are different arguments on either side of that, and you could also say that you don't need to take a radically different innovation path, and you can just continue working down the current path, especially if you get market integration right. But I think that's an interesting thing to pay attention to, and a trend which I see emerging. You know, the other thing from my perspective is battery technologies. Of course, you know, I don't want to harp on that. It's a bit of a cliche. To do a lot of things in terms of unlocking innovation in the transport sector and unlocking new synergies and that if we get this right. And more importantly, if we get batteries right in the broader context of creating markets for them and creating compensation mechanisms so that they are compensated for the services they're providing at the right time, then you know, it's a very significant development. There, I'm watching closely the California electricity storage mandate that Commissioner Carla Peter has written and is coming down. I'm also tomorrow actually flying out to Berlin, and I'm going to be attending a conference in Berlin and also speaking with some policymakers in the energy or the energy and economy industry about what they're planning to do with energy storage and how they see energy storage fitting into a new market reform package that the government's just starting to roll out. So in terms of interesting markets to watch, I personally look very closely at California. I look at Germany, and then I look at a couple others like in Asia as a harbinger of what's to come. China is such a unique market that I think it's kind of a market, it's unto itself in terms of the direction of that economy. I prefer to look more at Singapore and Thailand as interesting indicators on the storage side there. Obviously, very different maturity as compared to California, but very indicative of the huge growth markets that we're going to be dealing with in 10, 20, 30 years. I'd encourage others to look at Southeast Asia as well, just because I think that the British is there. Structure of power markets in Thailand, in Cambodia, in Singapore, in Malaysia, and in Indonesia are very, very interesting prospects. There's a reason that O-Power's major office besides California, Washington D.C., and London, Singapore. So I would look at that. The final thing I'll say is in terms of home energy finance trends. I'm a big believer also that this is not just about venture capital. It's not just about small pockets of capital. It's really normalizing this space and creating new vehicles that will get the foundation of our capitalist system, pensions, family offices, foundations, endowments, sovereign wealth funds, etc., insurance companies into this space. So I'll leave it there and allow you to ask another question. But those are some broad themes I would look at.
Cool. Thank you so much. Definitely a really great answer. One thing I was curious about is, where do you see solar functioning in a couple of years once the ITC either expires or is renewed? When do you see solar really being able to function without the ITC being needed? And also, do you mind speaking a little bit louder? There's a bit of background noise.
Solar and when I see the ITC not being needed.
Yeah.
I'd prefer to actually flip that question on its head and say the industry will need to deal with reality, the political reality. Whether we like it or not, let's assume that the ITC goes away in 2017 or shrinks significantly, and that we don't get some sort of deal to extend ITCs. Is industry ready? It's a really big question, and I'll speak frankly, knowing folks inside companies like SolarCity and Sun Edison, etc. And it's still a very immature industry, and they're on a race, and I frankly don't think they know if they can get there or not. I do worry a bit that we're going to fall off a bit of a cliff in 2017. What does that mean? It means the market shrinks a bit, or the growth of the market shrinks a bit. There's still going to be profitable projects, and these companies will still have some business, but the question is whether it becomes enough of a growth business they can continue to go out and get the financing they need at the cost they need to continue to be growth companies, or whether those companies, the SolarCities, the Sun Edisons, et cetera today, especially Sun Edison, runs into a lot of turbulence and maybe ceases to exist or gets snapped up by another player. As I was saying, I think it's still an immature. We have to remind ourselves this is a very immature industry still to this day. You go and you look at the mounting racks and things like that, and it looks sometimes like stuff that you put together fairly professionally, but still that you put together just from some parts and components from Home Depot over a weekend. We still have a long way to go in order to make this a manufacturing sector, as opposed to just a clean energy startup, which has grown very large and has a large capitalization.
David, this is Matt Caffrey. Thanks again for joining us. If you were directly speaking to, say, an underclassman, a freshman or a sophomore, and perhaps an engineering student at a big school in the Midwest somewhere, where would you advise them to spend their time and their energy if they're interested in this sector?
No pun intended. They should spend it whatever makes them come alive, whatever literally lights them ablaze with curiosity and with passion. Just because, at a meta level, at a philosophical level, I'm very skeptical of advice of that sort, where to go, because it's a dynamic and we were all to identify at the same time the right advice on where to go, the market would crowd there, and the returns to effort in that space by smart people would decrease simply because of supply and demand dynamics. And so I would say, you can identify a few broad themes. Software is obviously, kind of safe the software of energy. And I don't just mean software itself, but I really mean the smaller components, aspects of integrating storage and generation and demand response in a way where you're tapping into and you're maximizing revenue from both core markets, generation markets, as well as ancillary markets, whether they be various different stabilizing or standby or capacity markets, whatever they might be. I think that's definitely just an area which will generate tremendous amounts of interest. The other thing I would look for is ask yourself not what are going to be the most and this from kind of a self-interested standpoint for your students, but not what are going to be the most competitive and dynamic and interesting industries, because those are going to create a lot of churn, a lot of disruption, and they're going to quickly whittle away, opportunities to make impact and profit, because it'll move so quickly. From an entrepreneurial perspective, from a business perspective, you want to look at places where you can own new monopolies. I mean, the sad fact of the matter is that those who do the best overall, if you really actually look at this and study this, are those that create new monopoly positions and then extract rents from those monopolies. So go where people are afraid to go because it's too difficult. They're scared away from it. The barriers to entry are too high, and thus you don't get as much competition. That's what I would say.
Okay, thanks. I really like that answer. It definitely encourages people to think out of the box. Sort of along those lines, if these are such difficult markets to enter, how could prospective entrepreneurs expect to attract seed financing and get that initial sum of money that they need to really take their ideas off the ground?
Yeah, two or three things come to mind. Number one way you do it is you don't go into mature markets. You actually go develop solutions for not even emerging markets, but for markets which will be emerging 10 years from now. So instead of going into California or Texas or Austin or the UK or even Singapore, you go and you go get a Fulbright to go develop a product or to go study, and at the same time you're developing a business model and you're developing a product and you're developing a go-to-market strategy in Kigali in Rwanda, or in Accra in Ghana, or in Kampala in Uganda, right? That's one way to do it, in which it's more capital light. You can literally another thing I would say is you go away from the hardware side and you go to the software side of things. That's another way where you're just playing gradual market or greater market trend or macro trends after a lot of venture investors became skittish following the first wave of clean energy venture capital from 2008, through to 2012. And then the final thing I would say is to be different. Don't be just a clean energy company. Don't be just another better solar company or wind company or market integration company or demand side response. Find some other way to sell yourself. Demand side response doesn't really exist.
Ladies and gentlemen,
So find the next
all the things
like
when
health
comes to
and energy, food and energy, or
on behalf of
agriculture,
Trinity Crew and OBS Crew, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind courtesy. As you travel to New York
find
City,
how all those things connect
at this
and what
time,
sort of analytics
will be the ideal and the perfect time, ladies and gentlemen, to start gathering your personal items and please be jumping out to your items on the train
and
and prepare to depart the train.
go invent
As you go on the train, ladies and gentlemen, please be careful because the gap between the train and the platform. Again, ladies and gentlemen, New York Penn Station coming up. Have a safe night, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.
David, could you actually repeat that third point that you brought up? There was a bit of background noise, so we couldn't hear you.
Sure, absolutely. I'll repeat that point real quick, and then we're actually at Penn Station, so I'll have to jump off, and then I'll do my best to reconnect. So if you give me 5 or 10 minutes, I'll get off the train and reconnect. But what I was going to say with the final point is don't try and become a better company in an existing space, like ancillary services, demand-side response, solar, new solar materials, etc. Don't be newer and better. Simply invent a new elbow market between two existing markets. So, for example, we've got weather prediction markets for agriculture, and we've got energy producers, and we've got existing companies that provide services to natural gas producers, let's say, or to solar producers, solar generators. But what we don't have is a market that combines those two, right? We don't have a huge market for climate prediction for basically meteorological startups that do meteorological data analysis at a very, very, very sophisticated level. In order to predict or to help predictive analysis and maximizing value for solar producers or for energy storage in ancillary markets. So the broader point here is don't try and raise money by being the next so-and-so, the next Solar City or the next Tesla or whatever it might be, but instead go invent a new market at the elbow joint between two existing ones and define that market before anyone gets there. And I think that's what truly standout startups of the next 10 or 20 years are going to do. And with that, I'll jump off and then I'll connect back in just a second.
Cool. Thanks, David.
Great, Anand. This is Matt Caffrey with Spark, and this has been a really interesting conversation already with David. I guess I would like to encourage viewers to submit questions in the Q&A box. Again, you can get to that from the square grid of 9 squares up at the top of your viewing screen. Click that box, and then you can go into the Q&A app and submit questions, and then Anand can share those questions with David when he's able to rejoin us. Anand, what are your takeaways so far from the conversation with David?
So definitely some really interesting stuff. I like how he talked about the elbow joint between two different industries where
absolutely.
Nothing really exists. That's definitely a really big point. And honestly, most innovation happens when you combine two things that most people don't really think about. But then once you actually combine them, it makes a lot of sense. So that's definitely a really huge takeaway. Combine a couple of different things and make something that's completely new, although it might not look new at the very beginning. I would also definitely say that the whole discussion about Asia and Singapore and those markets there, that's also a pretty huge thing that people tend to overlook. China and India, for instance, are the ones that people really tend to focus on, and Japan to a lesser extent, Japan and South Korea to a lesser extent. But Singapore and the others, they have markets that are very unique. And although they might not be quite as heavy on the tech scene, in terms of how their economy is organized and how their markets are organized, it's definitely very conducive to the development of new financing techniques and new ways to really encourage renewable energy into the market.
Yeah, so, I thought both of those points were very interesting also. I think on the elbow market concept, I think that was so clever. The conversation around, there really isn't a meteorological startup to help predict generation from renewable sources. And I thought that was really interesting. One of the challenges with something like that, though, would be that it's very interdisciplinary, wouldn't it? And that so often our clean tech innovation circles are sort of homogenous. They tend to be, siloed out between subsections of the engineering world or from the business world. And it seems like that's one of the challenges that we as a community would need to address to make those sort of elbow markets more accessible, don't you think?
Yes, definitely. And actually, kind of building off of that, David has actually worked on this tool called the Oil Climate Index. And that incorporates a lot of different things, definitely not just science and technology and like business, but he goes into policy, government, economics, all the different things that really make oil a good choice for certain countries and a bad choice for others, and how to kind of either incentivize renewable sources of energy, or to speed through the transition through that dirty stage where you're going for coal, oil, things like that, how to speed through that and go towards better resources that have less of a carbon footprint. Definitely one of his areas of expertise.
That's really interesting. What questions are you anticipating asking when David is able to rejoin the call?
So I was sort of thinking, I was kind of wondering what milestones a clean energy startup would want to reach over a 5-year period. It helps to sort of have a goal in mind of where your company is going to go, just like within the early days of that company, so that you know you have a vision, you have like a definite commitment, and you know where you need to go and how to get there and what needs to be done to get there. The milestones are definitely very important, and I look forward to hearing what he says about those.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that reminds me of one of the other Spark advisors was sharing a very similar perspective today on a conference call. So I'm really interested to hear that. So I want to remind all of our viewers that, again, they can submit questions for David. If you've got an idea for a concept, or if you've got if you're interested in becoming an innovator, you can submit a question and ask David, get some perspective and some advice. The other thing I want to draw everyone's attention to is actually in the same section where you can find the Q&A app, the Showcase app, where you can find links to other events that Spark is organizing across the country. That is the Spark Clean Energy link in the Showcase. There's also a link to our resources tab, which has more resources for students who are interested in pursuing clean tech innovation. And then finally, there's a link to the fellows across the country. You can see a map of our fellows across the country, find their email addresses and their bios, so that if you are in New York or Los Angeles or anywhere in between, just about in 25 cities across the country, you can find out what's going on in your area. On that, you are the regional outreach intern that supports our efforts in the Great Plains, which is Austin and Lincoln, Nebraska. Do you want to update us on a little bit of what the program is like out in communities and in Austin and what the plans are in Lincoln?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of both areas, we're looking at a great list of speakers. There are a lot of people who are definitely very heavily involved in entrepreneurship, and both communities have a very strong presence in clean energy. Definitely the people in Lincoln, I've met a lot of them, or I've talked to a lot of them, and they have some really interesting experiences, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that turns out. Seeing as I'm stationed here in Austin, I can definitely say that I understand what's going on here a little bit more. In Lincoln, I'm a little bit more out of my depth, but here in Austin, I can definitely say that the curriculum is quite on point. We have some really great speakers from local tech incubators, a startup that was actually founded 10 years ago and has gone on to do some really great things. We also have the CEO of the energy resources branch of GDF Suez. He's managing a new technology, or I guess a new platform called Think Energy, that makes the purchase of electricity a lot easier. Like purchasing electricity from utilities. And it's definitely a very interesting tool because it's very catered towards the millennial generation. It's something that makes information very readily accessible, definitely at your fingertips. And it's not anything that, it's not necessarily revolutionary. It's a revolutionary new platform, definitely. But beyond that, it's really just putting together things that already exist. And thus far, it's had over 100,000 people using it in just the first year. So definitely some really impressive growth there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, and I can say the experience in Austin seems very similar to what's happening in some cities across the country as we gear up. There are events this week that have already happened in Columbus. We've got events coming up in New York, in Madison, Wisconsin, and a number of cities across the country. And it seems like students are going to have the chance to hear from local entrepreneurs that are really doing groundbreaking work in their communities. Frankly, some of them have gone through very similar processes that students today have the opportunity to participate in. Things like the Clean Energy Business Plan competition that'll be coming up this fall that we talked about a little bit more about last hour. And I really think there are some great opportunities out there for students. And if you're, say, a freshman, again, I like to return to this perspective of a freshman because I think they're, younger students are sort of the most at loss of where to start and where to go. What would you be looking for out of this conversation we're having today with David and about the broader project this fall?
I would kind of be looking towards how he believes that innovation occurs and how startups are built. The whole thing about going to a different geographical location, that one's definitely very interesting. Tesla had a couple of plans to install their home battery, the Powerwall, in different locations in pretty rural areas. And I don't believe that's economically feasible, but that does raise the very interesting question of if that was economically feasible and you could create microgrids throughout Africa, that's definitely a huge market. And there's so much that your technology could have the potential to do.
Yeah.
So the fact that he believes innovation can occur simply by being in a different geographical area, not even in another country, but in an area of the United States that perhaps isn't quite so into the clean energy sector. Sure, you need to build a couple of connections and you need to make sure that some of the infrastructure exists. But you could definitely do it right here in America as long as you have the drive to do it, and as long as there's a market for it and a demand for it.
Yeah, and on that point, understanding sort of the customer and who your customer is going to be, how you're going to reach them, that's a big focus of Entrepreneurship 101, which is one of the resources available in the blog and in our showcase section. We really want to encourage students to take best advantage of all of the resources that exist out there today. If you're interested in supporting clean energy innovation, that's something that we really want you to have all the resources to do. And speaking, Anand, of going out to other countries, he mentioned Ghana, he mentioned Uganda, he mentioned Kenya. These are countries where maybe there are lots of communities that don't have access to reliable electricity today. It seems like while this could be a great opportunity from a financial and business perspective, it also seems like it could have some pretty profound impacts from a social perspective, changing rural life across a few continents if the kind of microgrid structure really takes off. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I know Engineers Without Borders has already started a couple of programs that are meant to do just that, create microgrids in rural areas. And you could even look to beyond Africa, where there's a lot going on in Africa, definitely, but it's not the only market of its kind. There are areas in India like that. There are areas in China like that. It's definitely a monumental task that stretches out over the entire globe. So definitely a lot going on there, and it has a lot of meaning, I think, for international organizations like the UN, for instance. Yep. Among the UN's Millennial Development Goals, just energy and making sure that people have access to the resources they need, that's a really big one. Yeah. And with the way that the microgrid idea is shaping up and the way battery technology is advancing, making energy accessible to everyone and definitely drastically raising the standard of living, that's not so far away. And it's definitely an effort that's going to require lots and lots of people in the near future.
Yeah. And if you're a student kind of looking at your career and you want to combine the doing well with doing good, it seems like that's a really interesting opportunity. But we shouldn't forget that that's very true here in the United States too. I mean, if you're a low income family, your energy bill takes a bite, and if we can create clean renewable energy that is affordable, it might have an impact closer to home too. We also forget a lot of lower income families are the most impacted by the public health implications of our existing energy system. So if you're a student out there that's looking for a meaningful career, I think pursuing clean energy innovation is definitely one of the ways to pursue that.
Yeah, I actually worked on a project here in Austin called Go Solar Austin, just meant to encourage the number of photovoltaics installed on roofs. And one of the really interesting things about it was that even though we kind of, we tend to think of solar on your roof as more of a middle class, upper class thing, the people that really stand to benefit the most from that are lower income families, people who really don't really have many resources, and the electricity bill that they receive every single month, that puts a huge strain on the family. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the different nonprofit groups and general, I guess, philanthropic organizations that crop up to address that really big issue. Definitely, I've seen a couple of nonprofits starting to do that, creating communities where people can live in homes with solar installed on their roofs, where they don't need to pay such a hefty electric bill. And it's definitely started, but once it really catches on and more nonprofits realize that this is an option, I think we can definitely see the day that a lot of lower income families definitely gain a higher standard of living here in the United States.
And how big an opportunity do you think this is for? Oh, actually, I see David has rejoined the call, so I'll hand it back over to you guys.
Hey, David. Are you all set to rejoin?
Yep. Does this work? I'm trying to join on my cell phone because the internet's too weak for my computer.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely working. We can hear you quite well. You might want to speak up a little bit, but beyond that, you should be fine.
And
Okay,
Anand, let's make this final question that you've already laid out, the last question.
Okay, sounds good. So David, one of the biggest things that we were wondering was when these students begin their startup, they definitely need to have milestones in mind, goals that they can achieve. So what milestones would a clean energy startup that was started, say, today, want to reach over a 5-year period?
I would say, and this is by virtue of saying what I think there's too much of. I think there's too much focus on artificial exterior benchmarks. What I would look at, honestly, the best thing I would absolutely focus on is, are you pulling in better engineers than you should be pulling at the time? And are you gaining resources that people think is sane versus marketing and architecture? I really do. I strongly believe that. I think that any startup that's going to reach escape velocity goes after the best possible engineers. Doesn't try and at the same time develop a killer marketing strategy or spend too much time and resources and attention diverted by that. I think they keep a keen, disciplined focus by cutting out everything that's not necessary and by focusing on developing an incredible product. If that's the niche of the business, the niche of the startup is truly to develop an innovative and breakthrough and societally valuable product that the market will, etc. Focus on engineers and focus on people. And human capital is the most important metric as opposed to everything else that doesn't have people.
So sort of along the lines of the Lean Startup by Ash Maurya, the book.
Yeah, more or less. It's a slightly different philosophy than Lean Startup, but I think there's a lot to. I do think there's a lot of value in that book.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Definitely human capital is the most important thing in a startup, building your team. From everything I've heard from entrepreneurs here at UT Austin, I can definitely say that it's that initial team and the initial drive that everybody on the team has that really dictates where that startup goes. More than your idea, more than your product, more than the people that are backing you financially. It's really the team that makes a startup grow. And yeah, that sounds great. Do you have anything else to add on that, David?
Another thing I would say, I mean, just because she's a friend I met with her out at UT Austin, but Ellen Williams at ARPA-E is a great place to start. And the thing to realize about these government programs like ARPA-E, the energy side, is they can't go out and hunt companies. No matter how good you are, they will not find you if you don't go knocking. So if you're looking for not only capital from the U.S. government or loans, but if you're also looking for the signaling power that brings with it, which is non-negligible, and there are a lot of venture firms that do take their cues or appreciate the signaling value of a program like ARPA-E, or DOE loan programs, you have to go and apply, and you have to go make yourself visible. Because unlike other sources of capital, this is the other important thing to recognize, is that not all capital is the same. Some capital goes hunting, some capital goes foraging, some capital you have to go and hunt or forage yourself. Some capital is somewhere in between. So realizing these different pools of capital and what the entry points are, what the gateways are, and how best to make yourself visible or salient is very important. That's just the fun out there.
Thanks. For those of y'all who don't know, ARPA-E is a government program meant to fund revolutionary technologies, kind of along the lines of a government venture capital program, but with less restrictions. It's definitely a really great program, and people have a lot of faith in it, especially since clean energy seems more suited towards governmental financial backing than looking to satisfy people who have their own interests in mind, as venture capitalists generally do. So David's point right there was really important. You want to figure out which financing scheme works out the best for you. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for joining us on this call, David. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you guys have any other questions about also the policy space, which is, you know, a little bit more the world I live in? If you could actually just tell me also, what's the audience like tonight? I mean, who are we talking to, and what's the geographic and functional profile of the broader audience?
So you're talking to people all over the nation and all over the world. These are people located in cities and areas where Spark might not necessarily have a man on the ground, but they still want to get involved in Spark's efforts. So definitely a very global, diverse audience. If you'd like to add anything on to the policy side, especially in terms of government financing, I think that would be great. Maybe talk a little bit more about ARPA-E.
Sure. Well, we could do that, but I would also, you know, talk to people offline about that. If there's one thing actually that I did want to say that I really did want to reiterate, simply because there will be others who can tell you more about RPE, but I think I've got one message that a lot of folks might not necessarily bring, which is to think of, let's put it this way. Don't just think outside of the box, but literally to blow up the box. And what do I mean by that? I'd say inside the box is looking at traditional technologies like solar and wind and saying, I can do that and I can replicate it, or a little bit better. I can do it and I can replicate it, and I can do it cheaper, and I can do it cleaner, and I can do it more efficiently, and I can make greater profit with it, and I can deploy it faster. That's all great, but it's still just growing the box, or making the walls in the box more rigid, or making the box hold a little bit more. It's still operating within the box. Operating outside the box is some of those emerging fields we talked about that are slightly growing the box and working around the perimeters of it. So, you know, predictive technology, machine learning, a combination of machine learning and understanding markets and the growth of these complex side-by-side ancillary markets and subsidiary markets and capacity and regulating and all of those. Now, the thing I want to do is not actually go further outside the box, but it's just to say, what if you blow up the box completely and you go back to the existing fuels? So one thing we look at a lot at Carnegie, the place I work, is looking at the oil sector. And we look at the oil sector. Why? Because we can wish it away tomorrow with electric vehicles or with alternative fuels, or with new completely non-petroleum transport systems, new business models and services like autonomous vehicles integrated in a fleet, integrated with the Apple products, etc. But the point is, these things will take time, and there's a transition period. And the International Energy Agency in Paris, which is the foremost authority on these things, whether you agree with their modeling parameters or not, they predict that oil will, 40 years from today, still be the world's most prominent fuel, the most used fuel in the world. So that's a problem. The question is, do you completely ignore oil by working only in the solar sector, or do you try and innovate within it? Do you try and make it better? And one thing I'm very excited about is the prospect to bring renewables into the oil field, as well as to create new technologies that will have an outsized impact on decarbonization within that sector. Sometimes that looks like generation. It looks like actually just producing better energy within that sector. So that's, for example, bringing concentrated solar power into the oil field to generate steam, and steam you then use for enhanced oil extraction and very different oils. That's one example. Let me give you a less intuitive one. Developing chemical trackers or DNA trackers that you could use for either oil spills, or you could use for tracking the different oils as they get blended with each other and as they get refined into various products. And you'd be able to have a chemical signature for every oil in the world and every oil field in the world. And that would solve a number of problems. I mean, that gets at international security issues like the funding of terrorism through oil sales, like ISIS, Islamic State in the Middle East. That strikes at oil smuggling. That strikes at rail safety and being able to understand what crudes are transporting by rail and whether they're appropriate to transport by rail or not, so they don't explode in rail cars. But the thing I'm very excited about is it also allows them to start creating strategies and policies for policy or another capitalism where they can begin to encourage the use of cleaner oils, cleaner fuels, as opposed to dirtier oils. You can't do that right now because we create, we extract oil in the North Sea in Norway, or we extract oil in the oil sands of Alberta. We extract oil all around the world. And each of these oils has different carbon intensity footprints. I might encourage everyone to check out our website or check out the work we're doing at Carnegie on this. But the point is you can't track them because oil is both metaphorically liquid, it's a liquid market, but it's also physically liquid and fungible. And they all get mixed together, and it's very difficult to be able to create policy that tracks the value chain of oil the same way you can look at the value chain of solar, the value chain of wind, that eventually turn into the product that generates the energy itself. And so I just throw that out there as an example because it's not something you would immediately think of as an energy innovation, chemical fingerprinting, right? That's something which we use, isotopes or whatever it might be. That's something which we don't think about as an energy technology. But what if the development of those isotopes and the application of those isotopes and chemical markers to the oil sector or to a traditional fossil fuel sector had as large a decarbonization impact as any clean energy startup has had today? That would be tremendous. So that's what I mean as kind of a final thought is to just think not only inside the box and outside the box in the clean energy space, but if the objective here is applying science and technology and innovation and nimble business models to create new markets that will decarbonize the energy sector and decarbonize our broader economy over the century ahead, then you've got to blow up the box entirely and think completely horizontally across the whole plane and not have pictures in your mind of just the energy technologies today and making them better or following the footsteps. Think about disrupting the entire space.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a great insight. Thank you so much for joining us today, David. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. And apologies again that we weren't able to make this a more proper chat, but happy to join back on another occasion to answer some more questions. And best of luck to everybody out there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy your time in New York.
Thanks, Anand. Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Have a great evening.
Cheers.
All right, Anand, that was a really interesting conversation. I can't wait to download the video and tighten up the audio a little bit. But thanks, everybody, for joining us. Anand, do you have any final thoughts before we say goodnight?
Definitely disruption. David brought up a really great point there right at the very end. Never think on the small scale. Always think on a disruptive scale because that's what really gets people interested and really gets people motivated. If you ever look at the venture capital industry, the things that really get them into an idea is when it stands out from all the others. And I can definitely say that ideas like that, like the one David just posed, where you're shaping both the policy and the global political landscape, really. It's ideas like those that really make progress and really change the world, I guess you could say, because that's in fact what we're doing here. Yeah. And I really think that's something that's integral to the mission here at Spark. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what our students make of that.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And for all the viewers out there, there are months left to come as we move towards the national conference and the national finals, as students begin entering the collegiate competitions and other competitions. We'll be here helping to connect you to resources and ideas and to opinion shapers and folks like David and others. So we will make sure to keep you all up to date on future webinars and on the ground events that fellows are organizing across the country. But for now, you all have a great night, and thank you so much for joining the call.
Have a great night, everyone.
Take care.